Hello, beautiful humans. My name is Annie, and this is Holy Hell Hope. So I know I've mentioned that I am an expert weirdo and spiritual specialist, and the medium that I like to use for my spiritual conversations, the symbols that I find most helpful in facilitating that kind of spiritual exploration is tarot cards. So my life is filled with tarot cards, and my husband mentioned, hey, I don't know how those work. You should make a video, and I will watch it. Which I think is a fantastic idea. So, I would like to specifically here discuss the Major Arcana. The standard tarot deck has 78 cards, 22 of which are called the Major Arcana. They were also called trump cards, but that word has been ruined forever now, so Major Arcana it is. And specifically, I am here showing you the classic Pamela Coleman Smith deck, also referred to as the Rider-Waite deck. Rider is the company that first published it. Waite is the last name of the dude who created the ideas, but Pamela Coleman Smith, also named Pixie, is the beautiful artist and feminist powerhouse who created these images. So she's the lady that we like to lift up. So today I'm going to be discussing the Major Arcana in the classic Pamela Coleman Smith artwork. So, what is the difference between major and minor? I'm going to get into that more specifically in another video, but suffice it to say, these are the big ideas, kind of the major things that affect our lives as humans, and I'm a big old fan. I'm a sucker for a good abstract concept, and these 22 concepts are a system that is meant to be a description of the human being's experience of life. So these 22 concepts are meant to cover as many bases as possible and to speak to aspects of lived human experience, specifically in terms of symbols that were and are meaningful in society and culture and all that good mama jamma. So, I am going to here tell you the story of the Fool's Journey, which is the preferred way of talking about the Major Arcana because it explains the cards in sequence as that process. This is a very process, oriented, humanist flavored type of system of symbols. So, let me begin the story of the Fool. Okay. I've got a chopstick for pointing. All right. The Fool is the proto-human, the human in potentia. This represents the concept of the innocent soul, childlike exuberance, willingness to trust, specifically taking a leap of faith off a cliff into who knows what. So the number for this card is 0, but when folks apply the system of numerology to the tarot deck, this card is referred to as the number 22 because the doubled numbers are, of course, more symbolically significant. They're referred to as master or angel numbers. And of course, also referring to this as the 22nd card also emphasizes the idea that this is the cyclical nature of human experience. A person is going to experience these phases, these concepts, these struggles at various times in their lives. I mean, we do not actually go through this step by step in real life, but this is just a handy metaphor. Let's see. The emptiness of the number 0 also is a way of essentializing the the blank slate of the Fool. He exists outside of the rest of the Major Arcana as he's labeled with the 0, and as such, he is at the center of his own universe. So the Fool is the beginning of the physical self. You'll also note that there's a tiny little dog. Most decks make that some kind of animal who's expressing some concern for the kid who is about to jump off into the abyss. But when you are looking to remember the meaning of this card, things to focus on: goofy kid, leap of faith. Excellent. All right. So I wanted to discuss with you the Magician and the High Priestess simultaneously to begin, because they reflect the balancing forces of the entire perceived world. So everything that exists evokes necessarily its own opposite. So this is that dualism that's classic in most schools of thought, to be fair. So this is the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang. The Magician is the fully empowered human agent. So this is the way that the foolish human first encounters the concept of doing. The magician acts because the magician is consciously aware of having access to all of the tools of the trade. When remembering the meaning of this card, focus specifically on the fact that the wand, the sword, the cup, the pentacle is always right there in front of him. He has everything that he needs. So the card is generally going to represent someone who is able to, to work his magic, maybe a charismatic and resourceful person. Also could be a used car salesman type. That's the range of high vibe and low vibe. But the masculine active agent is the essence of the Magician, as contrasted with the High Priestess. So she represents the feminine, the yin, mysterious receptivity. If the Magician is about conscious awareness, then the High Priestess is the unconscious potential, the muchness that is necessary for the Magician to have stuff to work with to be creative. So this is the muchness card as well. It's all about potential that is going to be intuitively accessed, and so this is the way that the Fool first experiences the idea of being. So we have, come back, to do and to be, right? All right, and when you're wanting to remember what this card is all about, specifically just focus on the fact that she has two pillars. There's the black and the white. So this emphasizes that her role is discernment, telling light from dark, good from bad, but not, this isn't the Justice card, this isn't that emphasis. It's more about the mysterious spiritual discernment of good from bad, etc. She's got the Torah, she's got the cross, she's got the moon, all that good symbolism, but specifically those two pillars of good and evil and the discernment that she does with them. Okay, the Fool also then experiences the Empress and the Emperor. As the first two humans he encounters, mother and father. Mother Earth. She represents physical sensation, delight. So the Fool as human is going to be the baby, suckling at her breast. So that's why you've got the overt feminine symbolism, the lushness of the plant life around her, the stars in her crown, her scepter. The Empress is the goddess in every way, the mother in every way. The lowest vibe here would be maybe a cloying or overly anxious, overly protective mother. So there is still that range of meaning. But the Empress is generally seen to be a positive card representing yes, encouragement, that something new is coming into fruition, because there's usually more of an emphasis than here, but she is specifically pregnant. So the Empress, Mother Earth, is companioned by the Emperor, who is Father Sky, in a sense. If the Empress is everything concrete on Earth, then the Emperor represents everything abstract. So ideas of structure and authority, law and order. Specifically, order in terms of the positive idea that the fool is going to need to understand the patterns of daily life in order to succeed in daily life. So there is very much a high vibration, a very positive vibration for this card. But as you can see from the imagery, it is a very stern and austere emotional impression. So this is not often experienced as a very warm card, but certainly a very powerful one. All right, so the kid knows mommy and daddy, and the kid will eventually go to school. The Hierophant. The fifth card represents, sixth card, number 5. The 5 is specifically important here because then the Hierophant was going to correlate to the 5th card of each of the suits. And so the Hierophant, the central message of the Hierophant is going to ripple through those earthly manifestations as well. So basically, numerology, number 5, Hierophant. Okay. This card was also called the Pope, but it represents basically the man. All belief systems, quite frankly. This is going to be the government, the church, schools, major institutions. This is the young child joining society and beginning to be educated in how the daily life in society works. After he is at school, he is going to also experience the Lovers. Yes, on a straightforward level, this is about a young person's first experience of the desire to sexually unite with another person, but in a more general or spiritual sense, union is the point here. The Lovers card is going to be relevant in not just, love readings, but also this is going to represent any kind of pact making, really deep partnerships, but also the individual's effort to integrate the aspects of themselves. In this metaphor, the child gets to school and interacts with a lot of kids who are like him, but also not like him, right? Not just boy parts, girl parts, but also they're from other backgrounds. They have, other families, so they're bringing in different traditions from their home lives. And kids will bring home those questions, even from preschool, like, what's Hanukkah? Because my buddy, has Hanukkah, and now I'm curious, type of thing. So the Lovers is about the human endeavor to be in relationship with the other and the aspects of himself that he others, if that makes sense. That's lots of different levels of meaning there, but generally just focus on the very obvious symbolism of Adam and Eve, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the burning bush, all kinds of biblical imagery, etc. Okay, so the kid leaves school and he is excited about life. He has stepped into his confidence, his ego, and he is ready to do living. The Chariot is the concept of willpower. This is the human ability to master ourselves and have victory. So this is also about discernment, because you have, again, the echo of that symbolism, the pairing of the black and the white. Different decks might even have these two creatures, or whatever parties are pulling the vehicle. They might even be going in opposite directions, because it is specifically up to the charioteer to decide where the chariot will go. He does have to steer the damn thing, type of situation. So the Chariot is a card that often represents travel, victory, but also just any kind of compulsive forward momentum. If you feel driven to do something, if you, this could be related to addiction in terms of that need, but this is that strong forward momentum. Okay. The problem is every human being is going to run up against a situation where their chutzpah, their willpower, and their bravado is not going to help at all. And in those situations, they're going to have to rely on some kind of what would be called divine strength. So when the fool experiences suffering and disillusionment, he has to draw on the qualities that he may not have much of. He may not have nurtured up to this point, but every person is asked to develop some degree of patience in life, resilience, the ability to tolerate situations and people, tolerate getting through one day to the next. This is also the introduction for the child, the young person, to the idea of soft power. If the chariot is hard power, in classic imagery, a man in a chariot may well be armed. If this is hard power warrior energy, this is the soft power of diplomacy, because of the emphasis on the woman being gentle in taming the beast. So this would be symbolic of the beast within each of us. This is so much longer than I realized it would be. I apologize. The fool is eventually going to hit a situation where he has to understand why. Life does not make sense. Maybe the situation, even after his patience, his resilience, his faithfulness, it doesn't get better, and he needs to understand why. The hermit is about withdrawing into yourself. This is the introduction to your inner self. So you have a physical self, but you also have an inner selfhood, a psyche, a soul. Your you has to begin to process the meaning of what's been going on for you. So the hermit is going to withdraw and seek that deeper truth with that light source. And since this is a figure who is obviously an elderly man, this also represents the fact that the young man may seek a mentor, may want to find a teacher. But there is a cloistering here, a removal from the world in order to better understand the world. And that emotional tension can be problematic, and that would be the lower vibes for this card. But yeah, the fool struggles to understand his own feelings and beliefs, and in so doing comes to an appreciation of the natural cycles of life. The Wheel of Fortune represents that realization of the big picture, that this is a cycle that the wheel turns. There is a mysterious harmony in life as it's lived out, even when we don't try. The Wheel of Fortune, though, when it comes up in a reading, can also just represent a turning point or a plot twist. But the Fool at this stage, number 10, which is a completion number in the suits, he has reached the point where he is ready to move forward and move into action. The difficulty is he might feel ready, but he might not necessarily be ready in his mind. This is the concept of justice, number 11. This is the first master number. Numerologically, that's significant for folks who like that kind of thing. But specifically, the idea is that one is about putting two things side by side and trying to decide the difference between them, discerning whether they can be combined or whether they must be kept separate. So this echoes the High Priestess, but obviously in a more structured, systemic way. This individual is clearly out in the open, bright light, sword of truth, the scales of justice. I'm not sure the gender, but often the justice card is presented as female in other decks. But yeah, cause and effect, basically. This is trying to figure out the meaning of that big picture. And also specifically the fool has to reconcile his karma in order to take responsibility for everything that brought him to this point before he can move forward the way that he wants to after, appreciating the flow, the rhythm of that Wheel of Fortune. So he needs some discernment, and how does he go about finding it? He takes some time out. The Hanged Man. The fool pushes himself forward, but will eventually reach a situation that he genuinely cannot overcome, using any of the tools and resources that he's familiar with, or any of his past patterns or habits. Basically, he desperately needs a new perspective, or he will just continue to run into the wall and expect the wall to fall down. I mean, this card is a mood for me. I resonate deeply with this guy. But this card is about ego death, not physical death, but ego death. He must humble himself and let go. A phrase applied here is he is sacrificing himself to himself, which can be meaningful both in the sense of Jesus, but also Odin. Don't know if you know that story, but that's good times. But yeah, the fool surrenders control and finds that he is supported by his inner self. So he is able to gain some mental clarity to the lessons that he began to learn when he withdrew into his hermitage. So he's finding some serenity and peace in meditation. The Hanged Man is a much happier character than you'd expect. So it's not a negative card per se, it just suggests when it pops in a reading that something has come to a standstill, you cannot move forward and you must reassess for a new perspective. But before you can move forward, sometimes something needs to die. We got the Death card. This does not almost ever specifically represent a physical death. And thank God for that, because fun fact, this past week there was a day on which 3 separate decks gave me the Death card, and I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't freaked the hell out. I was very earnest for all of my loved ones to get home and just stay home and don't move. But anyway, so basically everybody can be superstitious about the Death card, but it doesn't necessarily represent physical death, but it does mean the complete ending of something, an ending from which there is no going back. So this can be the elimination of old habits and thought patterns, bringing closure to aspects of oneself that are dead, versions of you who aren't here anymore, who don't apply. So this is kind of the act of the Hanged Man breaking through the thought patterns and everything that was hanging him up and holding him back. But he does have to experience the pain of the death itself. It's not a happy card, but it is always important to point out, right there, my friends, that is a sunrise. So yes, death is inevitable. It comes for us all. He tramples a king, a child, a pope. He comes for us all, but the sun also rises. So there is always an emphasis that death is a required step in the process for the wheel to roll forward, and there is always a transition into new life promised by this card. This is not the card that says we're done forever. Something is, but the point of the Fool's Journey, and the point, I would argue, of the exploratory and insightful conversations that involve these readings anyway, the point is that the Death card is not you done with everything. This is just something where you're going to have to find a new normal. You're going to have to step into a new life. Yes, something has gone forever, and that's hard. It's just not a fun card to throw. But it is an important one because death is a reality that is relevant to every human being, and certainly every fool on earth. So, all right. After death is Temperance. The Fool has gone through some emotional turbulence in these last few cards, a lot of emotional extremes, so he now appreciates the idea of moderation. When the card pops for you in a reading, it is representing equilibrium. It might specifically be the practice of diplomacy, so like the act of compromising with another person. It also represents healing, so the mending of wounds, ailments, etc. The Temperance is generally a positive card, but I do get a little salty about it because usually the card is telling me to pump my brakes and I don't really want to. But anyway, specifically, the highest vibration of this card is the endeavor to create an integrated self, blending aspects of oneself for the sake of wholeness of well-being. So the Fool has found some grace and some peace, but does continue to exist. One day rolls into the next, and some shit goes down. Because the next card is the Devil. Good times. Because the Fool continues to exist in time, and especially if the Fool does choose to delve further into the layers of himself, he is going to encounter the Devil. This doesn't represent Satan. This almost never represents Satan, mostly because Satan doesn't exist. Probably. I could do a video on that too. That would be a lot of fun. But no, I mean, this is not the Devil. This is bondage. The whole point here is bondage. Ignorance, hopelessness, base materialism. So when the card, arrives in a reading, you're looking for some kind of addiction, greed, lust, addiction, gambling, just all kinds of difficult stuff that does in fact play a role in many people's real lives. And very, very obviously, the man and the woman here are meant to echo the symbolism of the Lover's card, but that is to draw this contrast because the love, the bond between these two people has been twisted. There is a perversion, the addition of despair. So the Devil is also not a happy card, but specifically it can be used psychologically as a way to remind us of the areas, room for growth, the really significant emotional and psychological obstacles are likely going to show up in the form of this card. Or, this card, the Tower. So the Fool can only sever himself from the Devil through release in sudden change. There is a monumental crisis of some kind. Forces of nature. So you got the lightning bolt. You have the shock of humiliation as well. Because the symbolism of the crown at the top of this fortress, this tower, and the people plummeting to their presumptive demise from the top of this tower means that the Tower card is relevant in a situation where life is turned upside down, where you feel as though everything has just been torn down and you're going to have to rebuild. It's some serious shit, this card. But again, it's not the last card. It is followed by another, and in fact, a much happier card. This is my favorite, the Star. The way that I like to think of it metaphorically is that when the lightning strikes the tower and the explosion occurs, the Fool is thrown out into the farthest reaches of darkness, inasmuch as the next three cards are all celestial bodies that are significant in terms of how much illumination they provide. So this is the farthest away. So there is a sense of kind of surrealness. This, for me, represents heaven, the idea of a pocket universe where you can be truly vulnerable. This woman is nude because she does not need to be elsewise. She is completely safe. She is in a place that is filled with love and healing. The Fool finds serenity and experiences divine grace, able to restore faith in himself and in the world. And this is what makes the human emotionally able to move forward after the devastation of a tower moment. The star represents whatever source may be relevant to you, but a source of joy, of peace, of fulfillment, of meaning, holding on to anything positive, something solid during the storm, and then finding peace after that storm. So the star represents incredibly positive, beautiful, flowing things, but because of the level of vulnerability of the star, this leads into the next card in that the Fool has let down his defenses and he is vulnerable to illusion and delusion, leading to the emotional distress of confusion. So the moon represents all psychological anguish. To echo the symbolism of the High Priestess, again, we have two towers, but they are gray. They are too far off to be able to distinguish one from the other. So you have that distance, the obscuring your view. The moon only brings limited illumination. You have the dogs, howling at the moon. Howling mad is a phrase that might come to mind for plenty of readers. The lobster, the creature crawling up out of the depths. This card can be definitely a speed bump in a reading, but the highest vibration of it is that the moon also represents all of the forces of imagination. So anybody who wants to be creative can harness the best potential of this card, but usually it's more likely to reflect confusion and fear, quite frankly. But fear not, because the moon is followed by the sun, and the sun is triumph itself. The maximum level of illumination brings lucid clarity for the Fool so that he is enlightened. Enlightened in that he can both feel via the star, but also ground in concrete experience now. The positive, the conviction that there is goodness in the world. So anchoring that abstract openness into reassurance of the glory of the sun. The Fool is returning to the naked babe state. So the card also, when it arrives in a reading, can represent that you are attracting sustenance, because a baby is so much in need that the response to it is often an urge to sustain. So the sun is almost always a positive card. It is the primary yes card for a lot of readers, representing victory and vitality in general. And once he has reached his enlightenment, he must then grapple with Judgment Day. The Fool is reborn. He sheds any remnants of his ego after the ego death process, the hermitage into the hanged man experience. He sheds that ego and he reveals his inner self and is grounded in faith to receive absolution. This is, again, very strong Christian imagery. The time has come for Judgment Day, so the Fool needs to make some decisions to actually act on all of the discernment cards that have been in play up to now. This is card 20, another stage of completion, another plateau. Judgment Day is about making those decisions about who you will be, what you will stand for, and what you will act on moving into the future. And the angel here represents the Fool's own highest self, that which calls him into his fullest potential. And it is in endeavoring to realize that potential that the Fool steps out into the world. He is re-entering society with a more complete understanding of how life works. He has a more integrated self, having achieved wholeness and fulfillment, ready to serve, in fact, ready to give back to the world and to go back into that cycle, the wheel, etc. When the card arrives in a reading, it represents completion, it represents big picture, the need to assess the big picture. It can also represent the idea of being surrounded, either, being the center of a lot of attention, or the highest vibration that I have ever experienced from this card. And I will leave this on this very, very positive note, I think. There have been times for me in readings that this card has arrived as a reassurance that I am surrounded by sources of support and of love and of peace that I may not know, I may not see and realize. But I discussed in my video on tarot and Christianity that these four figures surrounding the edges of the card represent the elements, represent the Gospels, represent stability itself. This is the big kahuna card, and is, in its truest sense, this is the card of shalom. And I think that is a very beautiful thing. But this video is entirely too long. Thank you for your patience walking through this journey with me. 22 stages in the human process of living into our potential. My name is Annie, and this is Holy Hell Hope. If you would like a personal reading, you can contact me at holyhellhope@gmail.com, and I will make a few other videos that will be much shorter, I promise, around some of the specific questions about tarot that normal people, like my husband, sometimes ask. And in the meantime, many blessings to you, my friends.